Now welcome to the stage the brilliant James Fryer, who is going to give us insight from the insurance side of things, because there's been some development going on there, or certainly there are lots of levers that the world of insurance can pull to ensure that our raw materials are sourced, etc., in a responsible way. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the fantastic James Fryer.
Thank you, Sarah. So we are the devil, of course, being in insurance, as Paul was lamenting the fact that being in finance meant that he got his boos. You know, I can already hear the boos being louder. The participant numbers are dropping off a cliff edge. So yes, I am simply an insurance salesman. And in contrast to this afternoon's speakers and panelists, I'm certainly no expert in sustainability and ESG issues. Which I'm afraid rather belies the fact that insurance still has a long way to go in these issues. And we are perhaps, as Paul was saying, where he was in finance and several years ago. I think that's probably where we still are. But that's not to say that we aren't starting to do a lot of good things, and we need to drive these issues forward. I admit that, you know, I find the whole question over sustainability and ESG certainly intriguing, massively important, of course, but from my perspective as an engineer, as an insurance salesman, I find it rather ephemeral. And I say that in the sense that I can't hit it with a hammer, and it seems in many aspects that it just seems that we should be doing these things. It's the right thing to do. So why aren't we doing it? So having said that, so just a brief introduction. I am a mining specialist underwriter with CNA Hardy, which is a combination of a very large US insurer, but also Hardy's syndicate in Lloyd's of London. My background is engineering, but I've been working in insurance now for more than 20 years, and specializing in mining for the majority of those years. So what I want to do today, I appreciate we don't have a lot of time, but then I've not really got that much to say. But what I want to do is give consideration to the role that financial institutions and mining and insurance specifically has, or certainly could have, in promoting positive ESG development. And I'll probably echo a lot of the sentiments that a lot of people have already said this afternoon. So as a specialist insurance underwriter, I mean, being in insurance doesn't make me a popular dinner party guest. And for long term, I struggled with, you know, am I a useful member of society selling insurance? And I came to terms with it because, and there is a point to all of this, but I came to terms with it because the financial security and protection that we provide today allows investment tomorrow. And among those things is investment in ESG issues. So which we're providing that security to enable companies to do that. And that's rather a passive effect of insurance. But there are at least two other ways, I think, in which insurance can help with this whole question. Firstly, is the role of insurance companies as investors. Any insurance company will have a business model within which there's a significant issue of them being able to use the premiums that they receive in order to then go forward and invest. And I know, as Paul was saying, that it's moving towards more kind of greener and ethical investments is well established. It's auditable. That's not what I want to concentrate here today on. What I do want to talk about is the role that insurance underwriting can have in promoting and perhaps leveraging improvements in ESG and sustainability among the companies that we insure. It's sometimes quite difficult to know who has the worst reputation, insurance companies or mining companies. At least among the common man or woman on the street. And I think somebody said it earlier that mining companies perhaps haven't been the best at promoting themselves in all the good things that they do, because all we see is headline news about people being trapped underground and explosions and pollution and all those things. But having worked in both sectors, I definitely think insurers have the worst reputation. And I say that because mining companies have done a great deal of work in the last years, decades, in improvements. And if a mining company can't maintain its social license to operate, then it's going to find itself in a really difficult position to be able to continue mining. And without doubt, my mining clients are spending a lot more time these days, as opposed to what they were doing 10 years ago, in terms of the amount of time that they're spending talking to me about sustainability and ESG issues. A great example was I was talking to Sibanye-Stillwater, Elaine, yesterday, not that you were on the call, but I was talking to your colleagues about their insurance renewal, and we spent a lot of time talking about sustainability, as I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear. And I really do get the impression that it's not just them saying these things, they're actually doing it as well. I think that really comes across. Having said that, as an insurance company, as an underwriter, I find it can be quite difficult to validate those credentials, given the extent of greenwashing that sometimes fails to stand up to that scrutiny. And of course, there's a growing cohort of organisations that can audit and score both qualitatively and quantitatively on those issues. But within the insurance industry, we don't routinely use those tools that may be available. And so what we do with that information is we file it, and it's very much more of a tick box exercise. Which leads me on to where do I think we are as an insurance industry in using that sustainability and ESG information that's provided to us, and what do we do about it? And I think we're very much in a position of short-term compliance. We will do what we are required to do, and we won't do anything any further than that. We don't want to get ourselves into a position where we have bad PR because we've been caught out. So we do what we need to do, and that's as far as it goes. And I think we've moved away from a state of shareholder capitalization to one of the stakeholder. And that means that we are coming under a lot more pressure from a lot more diverse interests. And that may be our customers and business partners, it may be our employees, it may be the wider society, NGOs, our peers and other insurance companies, or emerging market standards. But I think being pressurized into a decision, and in effect it becomes no decision at all, doesn't necessarily provide a good outcome, and there certainly can be unforeseen consequences as a result of otherwise overtly good decisions, certainly good intentions. And I'll raise the issue of coal and insurance, which is a significant issue at the moment. So under a number of years of intense pressure from various pressure groups and NGOs, personally I would say verging on the billion, many insurers and reinsurers have been forced into having an underwriting policy on coal. And sometimes that's just thermal coal, sometimes it's thermal and metallurgical. Sometimes people don't know the difference, particularly once you move up the ivory tower and you go into the boardrooms, coal just becomes coal. And what that does, it restricts the availability of insurance capacity for coal mining companies. And it raises the cost of that capacity. So insurance premiums increase. The consequences being that because we're not there able to provide them with that financial security and protection, they then can't go on and invest in transitioning to better, safer, cleaner technologies. I'll come back to that point, I think. With the best will in the world, coal is going to be a significant part of our energy mix for many years to come, notwithstanding the fact that obviously coal is used in many other industries, steel production, cement production, hydrogen, aluminium, the use of activated carbon for air and water purification, the list goes on. So by restricting that investment opportunity in the financial protection, I'm not sure we're necessarily in a better place. So where's my point here? I think we're in this compliance position. We shouldn't be in a compliance position. We should look at ESG very much as an opportunity. But we need to be able to work out how we do that. We need to work out how to embed it into our day-to-day underwriting activities. And I think if, and again, echoing what, a previous comment, if people are doing the right thing in terms of sustainability and ESG, then surely the results are going to be better and more tangible for us as insurers because we have less losses. Now, we already do this in many other aspects of insurance. So we employ risk engineers and they go out to our insured locations and they make recommendations for risk improvements. And then when it comes to the insurance renewal, underwriters will look at the responses to those recommendations, the implementation of those recommendations, and certainly in part, that will then dictate the availability of insurance capacity and the price for that capacity. And more specifically, we've already mentioned the global industry standard on tailings management, but we are requiring our mining companies that we insure to comply with some very rigorous standards around the design, the operation and maintenance and management of tailings dams. If they don't do that, then potentially they don't have access to that insurance coverage. So we're using that as that leverage to make positive change in risk management and safety. And there's no reason why we can't use that similar leverage on ESG. Now, that makes me sound like the bully again. So I was complaining about the bullies earlier. But what I would say is that if our insureds are willing to transition, if they're willing to make positive changes, then we work with them through that transition phase, recognizing that that change doesn't come overnight. Some of the things that we are asking them to do in order to improve and get better can take many years, but we will work with them through that journey. I think individually underwriters do some of this on an ad hoc manner. And for example, I wouldn't knowingly insure a mining company that I knew had a poor environmental track record or had human rights breaches, but I can't prove that in a systematic policy, and neither can I relate my underwriting to on individual companies to any kind of quantitative score on energy efficiency, health and safety, financial reporting, whatever it may be. But what we do need to do is we have to have that cultural shift within the insurance community that has that poor reputation of being very commercial and perhaps being quite unethical. But if we have that cultural shift, which is backed up by the availability of independently audited credentials, then that will help us along the way significantly. It's worked for the more traditional risk improvement, tailings dam issues that I mentioned. Yeah, we have seen significant improvements within the mining industry, partly as a result of that insurance leverage. Whether that can work for ESG will remain to be seen. I think we can, because we see other financial sectors moving in that direction. But as I said at the beginning, I think we find ESG perhaps a little more intangible in the context of the manifestation of the insurance losses that are coming through. If we say to a mining company, you have to put sprinkler protection in your warehouse, and if they don't, it burns down to the ground, we can see a direct correlation there. I'm not sure that we can necessarily see the same correlation with the insured losses coming through. There's more of that indirect link. But we're starting to engage within my role as the chairman of the Mining Insurance and Risk Association. We're starting to talk to a lot more people about sustainability and ESG issues. We do have a long way to go, but maybe, just maybe, at some point in the future, then insurers can become the good guys. Hard to believe, but maybe we can. Thank you.
Brilliant. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the fantastic James Fryer. Brilliant. I should also note, for anybody here who's not British, there was a slight element of sarcasm in some of what James was saying there, but also lots of elements of truth as well. So thank you, James. Just time for a couple of questions here, and there's one that's come in from John Clark, and actually just building on what you were saying about tailings dams. And he asks, he says, would your company, or perhaps if you don't want to talk specifically about your organization, would you be able to get insurance for an upstream tailings dam, given that, say, Brazil has outlawed future upstream tailings dams?
Absolutely, because there are many upstream tailings dams that operate perfectly well. Where we would question the risk safety factor of upstream dams is where they are constructed in seismically active zones, and also how they've been designed and operated, and all the the risk factors that go with that. So we would second guess ourselves on covering an upstream tailings dam in Peru, for example, but probably not so much of an issue in Australia.
Okay, thank you for that, James. So then coming on to how do you get, so obviously the Global Tailings Review has really helped insurance, I guess, to find that tangibility in terms of actually how do you get your arms around what do you insure, what don't you insure, or where do you go looking for those extra controls in terms of managing those different aspects of risk? Is this something then where mining as a sector needs to get better at making ESG more tangible? Would that help insurance come on board and get to grips a little bit more with where insurance can really help us?
I think it would, because we're dealing with numbers at the end of the day. We're dealing with risk, but we quantify that into numbers that we can understand. So unless we have that more tangible evidence, it's difficult to do that. We've been speaking to the Church of England, for example, on exactly how to implement the new global standard on tailings management, because it's all very well having the standards, but there are significant questions to be answered about how it's implemented, and then how do mining companies prove compliance with the standard. So it is having that data, and the insurance industry is moving ahead with better use of data. Anyone that is a new car driver that requires a black box in their car in order to get insurance, that's the way things are going. I can foresee a position where we have something for the mining industry, and maybe we have something akin to a black box for the way that mills are operated, or furnaces, or data from tailings dams in terms of readings from piezometers and extensometers, and all these different things. That data is key. But we already have a lot of data, but I'm not sure we're very good at using it. So it's both the availability of data and how we use it and interpret it.
And with that data, James, so last question is this data that you would expect to be provided by the person you're insuring, or the asset you're insuring, or is it something where insurance has an appetite to go and source its own data to almost get that third party verification as to, what are the emissions, for example, coming out of a processing plant? Do you rely on that processing plant telling you, or do you go and get, say, the satellite derived emissions data to go and check up on what that asset is doing?
No, absolutely. Look, as part of insurance, there's a duty of disclosure upon the insured to give us correct information. But we also recognise that mining companies use third parties, for their own non-destructive testing. There's already well-established procedures for third parties to come in to audit tailings dams and the management thereof. So we also access those third parties. If we had access to a third party that was able to provide us with data and interpretation in a consistent manner that can be used throughout the insurance industry, then I think we'd get a much better take up of the use of that information. And therefore, what we will then be able to do is we'll be able to differentiate between those mining companies that are doing the right things, and they can be scored, and what they're saying does stand up to scrutiny, as opposed to those that say the right things but don't do them. If that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. So brilliant. Thank you very, very much, James. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the fantastic James Fry.